Right, so now we're going to go ahead and implement our detail view for each one of these items. So let's go ahead and first start with the movies detail view. Now, of course, this is going to be based off of the movies proxy for that playlist model. So let's go into our views, and it's very similar to this one. So let's go ahead and import the detail view, and I'll go ahead and copy this, paste right below here, and we'll call this detail view. Notice I am still keeping in that playlist mix in there for now, and we'll go ahead and do detail. There we go. So let's bring this into our URLs and bring it into our actual URL for that path. There we go. So let's give this a shot. Okay, and it gives us a page not found. Well, if we go back into our movies, the actual list view, we should see what those slugs are. So that also means that in my template, I'm going to add one little thing just to see what it is. So in my playlist list here, let's go ahead and add in instance.slug. Okay, and we refresh, and now we see that it's Justice League. So let's go and take a look at that one. We hit enter, and it actually renders something. Now, it's not the correct stuff, but it is rendering something. It's not found, basically. So that, of course, means that we need to update our template view. So in this case, because it's a movie detail, now I'm actually going to call this my movie detail.html. So we'll go ahead and do movie detail.html. And inside of my templates, I'm going to make a new folder in here, call it actually playlists, and now inside of playlists, this is where I'll put movie detail.html. So that means in my views, I'm going to just go ahead and add playlists / movie detail.html. And just like this playlist list here, I'm going to go ahead and paste it in. And now my default object is really just the instance itself. So let's go ahead and get rid of all that. This time, instead of having the title, I'm going to go ahead and use instance.title. I'm just going to run with the default thinking that instance.title does exist. And I'll do the same thing in the head block here. Get rid of the condition statement. Okay, so let's save it and refresh in here. And I'm actually not seeing any data. Okay, so naturally, my first inclination would be to go back into my view and print out what the context is. Remember, I'm still using that playlist mix in here. So I can go ahead and print out the context, save that, and refresh. And what we should see is the context. Notice that it's not instance, but rather object. So in my movie detail, instead of instance, we just call it object. Simple enough. And there we go. We now see Justice League. Okay, and then Avengers, if we went into that one, we see Avengers. Great. So there's my movie detail. It's not quite done, obviously, but now let's go back into doing the next URL. So inside of urls.py, we've got our media one, which is just a catch-all view. So I'm going to call this my playlist detail view. So inside of views, yet again, I'm going to grab this one right here and paste underneath here. And this is going to just be playlist detail view. And this is going to be playlist.objects.all. I still have it imported. Okay, so this is now just playlist detail. I'm actually going to copy movie detail for this one. And we'll call it playlist detail.html. Paste in there. Easy enough. And the template name itself is playlist detail. Everything's looking good. Okay, so the title, I actually don't need the title on these arguments anymore, for the detail views especially. So now that I've got that, let's go ahead and bring this into our URLs. And I'm going to use parentheses now because I'm importing several things from the playlist list views, or the views module. And I probably should alphabetize those things, but I'm not going to right now. Okay, so I'm going to bring this in here as playlist detail view. So let's try this again, and this time I'll just go ahead and do media and maybe 12. I actually don't know if I have a media of 12, but I get an attribute error right off the bat. So this has to do with, well, how I named the variable here. Right, so by default, it's showing me that it must be called with either an object primary key or a slug. In other words, I can't use just ID as default. I have to use primary key as default if I want that default thing to render. Now, to know which ones I actually have as instances, I can go into my admin again, and I see that 14 is an instance, and that's the Avengers. Okay, cool. So what if I actually did want to use ID, though? How would I actually go about handling that view? Well, that's actually kind of simple in the sense that we can define get object in here, and what this is going to return is our actual object. So what I also want to do is say request equals to self.request, and we're going to go ahead and grab the keyword args. So keyword args equals to self.keyword args, and then I'm just going to return, for now, I'll just go ahead and return self.get query set dot first. Okay, and I'll print out the request and the keyword args. So we refresh in there, it changed the actual object itself, and then if we look at what the print statement was, we see this is our request right here, and these are our keyword arguments. So keyword arguments are coming directly from the URLs themselves. That's this right here, right? So that is how our view is going to go about grabbing those keyword arguments. So that actually ends up working pretty well for us overall. But one of the things about this get query set is we actually would want to filter this, and we would do by what those keyword arguments would be. So we can actually set, let's unpack those keyword args like this and try it this way first. So we'll go ahead and run that. And refresh in here, notice that it is giving me the Avengers. What if I do some number that doesn't exist? It's actually not rendering out my does not exist error, right? So that's, of course, a problem that I definitely do not want to have when I'm running these things. So that means that I actually would want to update how my get object works. But actually what I'm going to be doing here is making a lot of work for myself by just using a different keyword argument than what I should, or actually the variable name for the keyword argument. So just calling it primary key takes away a lot of work that I would have to do in this get object method, which is why I'm going to go that method. And then I can refresh in here. Now it automatically gives me a page not found, and it's also going off of the playlist mixin query set here. So if we look up, we've got this published right here. This will only show me, or should only show me, things that have been published. So let's try that out with the Avengers movie, or that media. I'm going to change this to being draft and save. And now if I go in here and refresh, again, page not found. But going back into how I had it with this, let's try that again. And this now overrides that default method, right? So if I refresh in here, this is just giving me an empty page, right? So those two things are not great. Now, yes, there's ways to handle this, and it's probably fairly obvious on what you could end up doing, but I don't want to do that. I don't want to override this get object method when I have a very viable alternative by just changing the keyword argument in here ever so slightly. But then the very next one, we actually will have to override that get argument. But I will come back to that and show you exactly what needs to be done shortly, because these two right here are going to be the same thing, right? Either way, those are going to be the same view. So we'll finish that one, and then we'll do the actual TV show itself. So back into our views, let's go ahead and copy our movie detail again. And this time it's going to be TV show detail. And let's call this TV show underscore detail. Okay. And the proxy itself now is TV show proxy. And that's it. So now we can go ahead and import this. And right under our list view here. And TV show and TV show. Okay, so naturally I will need to make my TV show detail as well. So inside of playlists, TV show underscore detail.html, still the same. We won't change it at this point. We're just trying to get our detail views working, not so much spending a lot of time on the templates themselves. Okay, so the next and final one will actually be implementing this right here. Okay, so how do we go about doing this? Well, there's several different things on what we will actually need to accomplish. First of all, we're going to go ahead and call this our TV show season detail. And this could go based off of the TV show proxy itself, or we can actually use the TV show season proxy, right? So this is actually the one we should be using because of how we've associated so many things related to this. So let's go ahead and bring that in. Okay, and just like I mentioned in the TV show list or the playlist detail view that we were talking about before, we're going to go ahead and get object. And this should not be in TV show detail, but rather let's go ahead and create the get object in the TV show detail view. So our season detail view, self, and again, keyword args equals to self.keyword args. And then we're going to go and return. Well, this time, of course, we want to use the TV show season proxy and here. And I still want to filter it. So I'm going to go ahead and do QS equals to self.getQuerySet. Now, the reason I'm doing self.getQuerySet is because it's going to take this into account as well as this playlist mixin, which had our publish view here. Okay, so that's the key reason for that. Next, I want to grab what my keyword arguments were, which is show slug and season slug. So then back into my views, I'll go ahead and say show underscore slug equals to keyword args.get show slug, and season underscore slug equals to keyword args.get and season slug. Now this is another reason to actually have these different, is so I can see the difference between Python and what's coming through on my keyword arguments, as to hopefully not make too much confusion here. Okay, so the show slug is the parent playlist. So going back into our default playlist model, we're gonna have to scroll all the way up and see that it says parent, right? So the first query set item that we need to do on any of our playlists, but specifically this one, is to filter parent underscore underscore slug underscore underscore iExact equals to show slug. Okay, so that's going to now go based off of that show slug, and then we can filter it again with the slug iExact equaling to the season slug, which is going to be that internal slug, that single playlist slug. Of course, we could go based off of that single playlist slug, but then it's not going to take into account the parent one, and thus we might have some duplicates in here, so we want to avoid that. Now what I'm going to say is if not qs.count equals to 1, then we're going to go ahead and raise an error here. We'll talk about what that is going to be. So let's just call it an exception for now. And then what we're going to do, and we'll go ahead and say not found. Okay, and then what after that, assuming that this is found, or it's, if it's not equal to 1, so if it's greater than 1, it's going to raise an exception. If it's equal to 0, as in it doesn't exist, it's going to raise an exception. Now, if it is found, we'll just return qs.first. Okay, so let's call this the season detail. Great. So this should actually end up working. Now, let's go ahead and bring this into our URLs and just test it out. So TV show season detail view down into those two slugs. There we go. So let's go ahead and try and find one that actually has multiple seasons. I'm going to return Avengers to being published and go into my TV shows, The Office. Okay, so I just want to see that there's a couple seasons actually published, and it looks like there is. Okay, so let's go into our TV shows now. So shows, and we got The Office, and it has 2 seasons. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at The Office. Granted, the default is in there, and it's not showing us all of the items that come through, so we definitely do want to have that. And if I go into seasons, it's showing me the same thing. So the actual detail view includes seasons in there. And the one we want to use is probably, I think it's season-1. Just making a guess here. And sure enough, it's giving me a template does not exist. So let's go ahead and make that template. And it's going to be identical to all of the templates we've made so far. And there we go. Refreshing here. And sure enough, it's showing me season 1. So if I tried a different slug, it's going to give me a not found. Well, that is an exception, and I actually raised that exception. That's not the correct exception, though. There's one that we can use that's built into Django. That's from Django.http import HTTP 404, as in page not found, as in this right here is now going to be raise HTTP 404, page not found when we go to get that object. There we go.